People who have few friends are often judged before they are understood. Society sees an empty social calendar and immediately creates a story. They must be lonely, rejected, awkward, or incapable of connecting. But appearances are rarely the truth. Sometimes the person standing alone has simply learned something that the crowd has not. They have discovered that solitude is often cheaper than the price of belonging to the wrong people. Most human beings crave approval. They want to be invited, noticed, accepted, and remembered. They adjust their opinions, soften their personalities, and tolerate things they would normally reject, all for the comfort of belonging. But those who become comfortable alone begin asking a more dangerous question. What am I sacrificing just to be accepted? That question changes everything. They no longer measure relationships by how many people surround them. They measure them by the quality of what those relationships bring into their lives. Peace, honesty, growth, loyalty, respect. If a relationship demands that they betray their principles, they would rather walk away. This is why solitude becomes more than an absence of company. It becomes a training ground. When you spend enough time alone, you begin hearing thoughts that disappear beneath the noise of other people's opinions. You observe your own weaknesses. You recognize your patterns. You discover what motivates you and what controls you. Silence becomes a mirror. And the person who learns to sit comfortably in front of that mirror becomes increasingly difficult to manipulate. They no longer need constant entertainment. They no longer require applause to feel valuable. They can question themselves without collapsing under criticism from others. This also makes them less vulnerable to the crowd. Trends change, opinions change, popularity changes. The crowd moves from one obsession to another, often without asking why. The independent person pauses. They ask, "Does this actually serve me?" That hesitation can make them appear distant. Others may call them arrogant, cold, or antisocial simply because they cannot easily be influenced. But there is a difference between arrogance and independence. Arrogance says, "I am better than everyone." Independence says, "I do not need everyone to approve of me." That distinction is powerful. People with few friends also tend to understand another uncomfortable truth. Being surrounded by people does not guarantee being understood. A person can have hundreds of contacts and still have no one they can truly trust. Social quantity creates the appearance of connection, but only depth creates genuine belonging. So these individuals become selective. They do not want relationships built on gossip, convenience, jealousy, manipulation, or mutual pretending. They would rather have an empty room than fill it with people who slowly destroy their peace. And this leads to one of their most misunderstood traits. They trust slowly. They have learned that words are cheap. Anyone can promise loyalty. Anyone can appear kind. Anyone can create an impressive first impression. But character is not revealed during the first conversation. It is revealed through repetition. Watch what someone does when there is nothing to gain. Watch how they treat people beneath them. Watch how they behave when angry. Watch whether their promises survive inconvenience. Time exposes what charm conceals. The person with few friends understands this instinctively. They do not immediately hand someone access to their inner world. They observe first. Not because they hate people, because they understand people. They know that the most dangerous mistake in relationships is confusing appearance with character. A charming person can be dishonest. A confident person can be insecure. A friendly person can be manipulative. And someone who speaks endlessly about loyalty may be the first person to disappear when loyalty becomes inconvenient. This is why patient observation becomes their defense. They notice patterns others ignore. Who constantly blames everyone else? Who changes personalities depending on the audience? Who speaks cruelly about absent friends? Who appears only when they need something? Who promises more than they consistently deliver? These details seem small individually. Together they reveal character. And once someone learns to recognize patterns, they become much harder to deceive. But there is another consequence. Because they trust slowly, the friendships they eventually choose can become extraordinarily meaningful. They are not collecting people, they are selecting them. One trustworthy friend can be worth more than a room full of acquaintances. This is not social failure, it is discernment. They understand that every person you allow close to you influences your thinking, your habits, your emotional state, and eventually the direction of your life. Choose badly, and you inherit their chaos. Choose wisely, and their presence can strengthen your life. That is why standards matter. People with few friends often possess a private rule that they rarely announce. They would rather be alone than be diminished. They will tolerate neither endless disrespect nor relationships that require them to abandon themselves. Many people fear losing a relationship. These individuals have learned to fear something else, losing themselves inside one. A disrespectful joke is ignored, a broken promise is excused, a one-sided friendship is tolerated. At first, compromise feels harmless, but repeated compromise teaches others how much of you they can take without consequence. Eventually, the person realizes something important. Every boundary you refuse to enforce becomes an invitation for someone else to cross it. So they begin walking away, not dramatically, not with speeches. Sometimes they simply become unavailable. And this is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength, the ability to leave without needing revenge. They do not always need to prove that someone was wrong. They simply recognize that the relationship no longer belongs in their future. Their silence is not weakness, it is a decision. Their solitude is not necessarily loneliness. It is sometimes the space in which they rebuild themselves. While others chase attention, they may be developing skills. While others compete for approval, they may be studying. While others waste energy maintaining appearances, they may be building something privately. They understand a principle that many discover too late. What you repeatedly invest your time in eventually becomes your life. So they invest carefully. They read, they learn, they create, they reflect, they improve, they build, and over time, something changes. Their confidence no longer depends entirely on who notices them. They do not measure their worth by messages, invitations, followers, or social status. Their confidence comes from knowing that they can stand alone and still continue moving forward. That is a dangerous kind of freedom, because the less desperate you are for approval, the less control other people have over you. You cannot easily manipulate someone who is willing to walk away. You cannot easily intimidate someone who has already learned to stand alone. And you cannot easily control someone who knows exactly what they are unwilling to sacrifice. Of course, solitude is not always strength. Sometimes people withdraw because they have been hurt. Sometimes isolation hides fear. Sometimes someone genuinely needs connection but does not know how to build it, so having few friends should never automatically be treated as evidence of superiority. The deeper lesson is more balanced. Being alone is valuable when it helps you understand yourself, not when it becomes an excuse to avoid the world. The goal is not to reject people. The goal is to stop accepting the wrong people simply because you are afraid of being alone. There is a difference between isolation and independence. Isolation closes the door because of fear. Independence closes the door when something inside no longer deserves access. And perhaps that is the greatest trait shared by those who genuinely value solitude. They stop asking, "How many people want me?" They begin asking, "What kind of person am I becoming?" That question is far more important, because the ultimate goal is not to become someone who needs nobody. It is to become someone who can stand alone without losing their identity, and who can then choose relationships from strength rather than desperation. When that happens, friendship changes. You stop collecting people, you stop chasing approval, you stop confusing attention with affection and popularity with loyalty. You begin looking for character, consistency, respect, depth. And when you finally find those qualities in another person, you understand why the years of solitude were never wasted. They were preparation. The strongest person in the room is not always the one surrounded by the largest crowd. Sometimes it is the person who can leave the crowd, remain true to themselves, and keep walking without looking back. People with few friends are often misunderstood because society measures connection by numbers. But a small social circle can sometimes reveal something far more powerful: standards. They have learned that every compromise teaches people how to treat them. Ignore disrespect once, and it may happen again. Excuse dishonesty repeatedly, and dishonesty begins to feel normal. What starts as a small compromise can eventually become a lifestyle. That is why these individuals often protect their boundaries early. They understand that relationships are not neutral. The people around you influence your thoughts, habits, ambitions, and even your character. Spend enough time with negative people and negativity begins to feel natural. Stay close to dishonest people, and integrity slowly becomes negotiable. So they choose carefully. They would rather lose a relationship than lose their self-respect. This does not mean they demand perfection. They simply refuse to accept relationships built on manipulation, constant disrespect, dishonesty, or one-sided effort. Their philosophy is simple. Peace is more valuable than forced companionship. This mindset also creates emotional independence. Most people unconsciously give others control over their emotions. Praise makes them feel valuable. Criticism makes them question themselves. Rejection makes them feel insignificant. But those who become comfortable alone gradually build a different foundation. They stop asking, "Do people approve of me?" They begin asking, "Am I living according to my values?" That shift creates freedom. When your confidence depends on applause, anyone can control you by giving or withdrawing it. But when confidence comes from discipline, integrity, and personal growth, it becomes much harder to manipulate. Emotionally independent people can appreciate companionship without becoming dependent on it. They understand that relationships can enrich life, but they should never determine a person's worth. Another trait often appears alongside this independence. They speak less and observe more. Silence gives them information. They watch how people behave when they are angry, criticized, ignored, or given nothing in return. They notice whether someone's actions match their promises. They pay attention to patterns rather than being hypnotized by first impressions. Anyone can appear impressive for an hour. Character requires consistency. This is why they rarely rush to trust. They allow time to reveal what charm hides. Their privacy also becomes a form of discipline. They understand that not every goal needs to be announced. Not every emotion needs an audience, and not every personal detail deserves to become public knowledge. Privacy is not secrecy, it is control over access. But eventually, all these traits lead to something greater: purpose. Once a person stops chasing approval, they have more energy to build themselves. They learn skills, they read, they work, they improve, they pursue meaningful goals. Their satisfaction comes less from being noticed and more from making progress. And something unexpected happens. The less they chase popularity, the more genuine respect they may earn. Because real respect is rarely created by demanding attention. It grows from consistency, competence, discipline, and character. Purpose also changes how they experience solitude. Instead of constantly wondering who is watching, they focus on what they are building. Their life gains direction. They no longer need a crowd to prove that they matter. They understand a deeper truth. Popularity depends on other people's opinions. Purpose depends on your commitment. So having few friends is not automatically a sign of loneliness, weakness, or social failure. Sometimes it reflects a person who has learned to protect their peace, choose relationships carefully, stand emotionally on their own, observe before trusting, and pursue a life larger than approval. The goal is not to need nobody. The goal is to become strong enough that you never have to accept the wrong people simply because you are afraid of being alone. Become valuable before becoming popular. Build character before seeking recognition. And choose people who strengthen your life, not people who require you to abandon yourself to keep them.